item 9, please, Mark.
The application is for the variation of a planning condition on a planning permission to facilitate the occupation of 5 The Oaks by Iceland Food Warehouse. The Oaks is defined as a retail park by the local plan, and the goods that can be sold from it are controlled by that overarching original planning permission, which is from 1989 under reference HLW/342/88. The site is shown edged in red here. It would occupy the Carpet-Right unit, and there's no operational development proposed. There's the unit there. The key issue for consideration in whether the application passes is whether the application passes the sequential test, which directs main town centre uses, like the proposed one, to town centres first. Out of centre location should only be accepted for retail development where there are no sequentially preferable alternatives. The council appointed retail consultants to assess the applicant's case to see if there are any sequentially preferable alternatives to the location proposed. The only option that was ultimately considered to be potentially appropriate was the former VHS unit in the town centre, because the other units in the town centre are either too small or not available. The council's appointed retail consultant states that VHS would likely be unattractive to Iceland Food Warehouse, as there would not be immediately adjacent at-grade parking, and because there's an existing Iceland store nearby at the harbour centre. Whilst those issues do not indicate that the proposal is unsuitable, importantly, it is clear that Iceland Food Warehouse operates only from retail warehouse formats across the UK. Officers specifically asked whether this should be taken into account, and the retail consultant has stated the refusal of the application will be difficult to justify in these circumstances. Given the unique, specific operational and locational requirements that have been established for Iceland Food Warehouse, it is considered that the sequential test is passed. Aldi, who are located at the Stowe, and Lidl, who have an application pending to occupy the unit at the Queensgate Centre, have both made late representations regarding the application, and the summary of those comments, or the majority of those comments, has been circulated tonight. You've got a paper copy. In summary, Lidl want both its application and the Iceland application to be considered at the same time, as they feel the same planning considerations apply for both applications. Aldi want the cumulative retail impacts of both the Lidl and the Iceland Food Warehouse applications to be assessed, stating that cumulatively there would be a significant adverse impact on the Stowe store. The council has sought advice from the retail consultants on those points, and it's considered that the retail impact must be assessed separately, and if permission was granted for the Iceland store, then that would obviously prevent us from considering the implications of that for the Lidl application. Unless the case for requiring a retail impact assessment is extremely strong, from the applicant's point of view, the council could lose an appeal if they'd required something which wasn't actually considered to be necessary. For the purposes of the application, the impact on the Aldi was considered by the applicants and the council's retail consultants, and it was considered that Aldi would be minus 3.7% worse off, which is not considered to be a significant adverse impact. The application is recommended for approval, meaning that condition 3 imposed on the original decision notice should be varied to enable the occupation of the unit by Iceland Food Warehouse. The varied condition has been drafted to limit the scope of an alternative retailer occupying the unit by requiring the retailer to be a frozen food retailer and to control things like the size of the sales floor area, to prevent additional mezzanine space being inserted into the unit, and to prevent services such as fresh food and like delicatessens, hot food counters, that type of thing. It should be noted that a similar approach was taken for the Home Bargains unit, which also can sell food from part of that unit, and that's adjacent to the site. Therefore, it's recommended that condition 3 of the application under reference HLW/342/88 is varied as set out at pages 61 and 62 of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, we have no speakers for or against this other than the agent, Mr. Phillips.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is David Phillips. I'm a Chartered Town Planner and I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant. Also with me tonight is Martin Robeson. Martin's on hand to assist me in answering any sort of specific questions members may have. Basically, don't want to rehearse the detail of the proposals here. I think these have already been succinctly covered by the officers in their report. However, I'd just like to respond to the objections from Aldi and Lidl. In essence, their objections wrongly interpret many aspects of planning policy. Just by way of example, there's no policy requirement to assess impact on proposals other than those that are allocated or otherwise have planning consent. In a nutshell, in the case of Aldi, there's no material planning harm, as has already been said, from its store trading to the north of the Stowe. Indeed, Harlow's own retail and leisure needs study confirms this very point. I now simply just wish to draw on some of the key messages. Firstly, in terms of retail impact, government policy only requires assessment only over 2,500 square metres. This proposal is only half that size. The applicants nevertheless provided a retail impact assessment. And the council's own consultants found that the proposals do not pose any threat to Harlow's retail hierarchy. Sequential testing. Policy requires that applicants should look first at suitable and available opportunities to accommodate proposed development. The particular requirements of the retailer can be taken into account, for example, buy in bulk and surface car parking. Nevertheless, vacant units were thoroughly investigated and found not to be viable. So in short, rigorous testing by the applicant's consultant has demonstrated compliance, and through scrutiny by the Council's expert retail advisors confirms acceptability. Nevertheless, conditions will ensure that only the type of retail use assessed may take place. Existing bulky goods user condition remains intact, with only this unit being permitted to have additional frozen food retail use. And risk of precedent being established does not arise here, as deviation from what is approved would need to be the subject of a further application. So to conclude, the proposals are wholly consistent with the changing nature of the retailing across the country, manifesting itself with retailers going into administration, for example Maplin on the same site, and retailers downsizing to remain viable, that is Carpetright moving from the subject site to the smaller vacant Maplin unit being a classic case in point, and obviously not to forget the very important employment considerations here, where there will be at least 25 new jobs created. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions, members? None?
Okay. Thought I was going to escape.
Which isn't linked particularly with this site, but just could you reassure us there are no plans to shut your other stores in town as a result of this one over?
Well, certainly, I'm obviously the planning agent for Iceland. I'm not Iceland themselves. However, they have, I am sort of led to believe they trade very well from the town centre. This is a very different type of use and operator for them. It's a slightly different function. It's to say, for example, you have a Tesco Metro here in the town centre, but you equally have the out of town centre stores that operate the Tesco. It's a different product and a different sort of market they're sort of catering for.
Any other questions, members? No. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, wait a minute. There is one.
I'm not saying it's an observation rather, which may turn into a question, but I am concerned about the access to that site, as it were. So, in terms, because you come off the main road, get the name of the main road, and then you come off of the main road, but on a very small roundabout, there's quite often a whole lot of congestion and what have you there. And I'm concerned that the addition of such a facility as you're attempting to put in there will have an impact, an adverse impact on arguably an already congested site. And I just wonder, what if any, have you done in any way any sort of studies around access to?
There's two basic things to that.
Yeah.
Firstly, the application has been accompanied by a transport statement which sets out proposals in detail and assesses the impacts on the transport network. Secondly, there is no material increase in overall retail floor space. So from a transport point of view, it's effectively neutral.
I would doubt it, given the carpet. I mean, in terms of carpet, right? The existing site has few people going in there having a look at carpets, etc. This sort of facility will have a whole. It's a different business, and in terms of the impact on the number of people using, quite a restricted car parking space, and also the impact, in particular on that roundabout, I suggest would be significant. That's just an observation. Debate later.
Thank you. Debate?
Obviously, the officer's report is extremely thorough, and the sequential test has been pushed this way, that way, and there's been various options put forward as alternatives which aren't either available or the right size. So I see no reason to refuse the amendment to that condition. Variation condition.
Anybody else?
Well, I don't like it, but I don't think we can turn it down. Potential.
Not happy with that.
So I can only just hear you, Jean.
Pardon?
I can only just hear you.
They said, I think I'm a little bit louder than Jean, so I think that the general view was that there's a number of councillors who aren't happy with it, but who would much rather it was in the town centre because we're trying to regenerate the town centre. However, we do appreciate that due to there not being anything available at the moment, we are in the position we're in.
Yeah.
Is that summarising members' views?
Yeah.
I might do it.
Right, so we've got microphones so we can't hear each other.
Yes. I hope that next time we'll have microphones.
Absolutely.